Let's move on to Module 6, working with calendars. In this particular module, we're going to be working with base calendars and project and resource calendars and learn about the different ways in which we can represent non-working time, we can represent company holidays, and also have our projects reflect very specific calendars. You'll want to make sure that you're in your Module 6 file. And of course, the first thing we're going to do is open that file up and give it a new file name so we can make changes to it. So the first thing we want to learn about is understanding and working with base calendars. As you start to create your schedules, one of the first things you'll notice is that each project will have a very specific base calendar. This is where you're going to want to put in the standard working time. In this case, you have 8 to 5 as the default settings. This is where you're going to want to put in very specific company holidays. This is also where you can create various group calendars. If you have a group of resources that are working on your project that are perhaps working on evening shifts or working on a Saturday, you're going to want to represent that within your project. You will also have an opportunity to have each of the resources have their own unique calendar. So as you start to work in the resource sheet, and we'll see this later on, you can designate their base calendar. So it's going to be important to have all of the non-working time represented within your schedule so that you have a better sense of when work is actually going to get done within your project. So the first thing you'll notice is we want to go up to the calendar options and learn about what the default settings are. So if you needed to make project-wide changes to the schedule and the calendar settings, you're going to want to know where to do that. It's going to be in the calendar options. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new base calendar for your particular organization, and then we will create some exceptions within that calendar. And we'll do that for a few different holidays in this particular case. And then what we're going to do within our project is we're going to designate that new calendar as the default calendar for that particular project. After that, we want to be able to edit resource calendars. So we're going to go into the project manager in this particular case and designate their calendar as that new company calendar so that they too will inherit those changes that we made to that new calendar that we created. What we're also going to want to do is then edit that resources calendar. So they have a particular vacation coming up, so we want to make sure that in our schedule that we don't have him, in this case the project manager, working on days when normally they're going to be off. And we'll walk through the steps for doing that in this particular exercise. And then we'll finish up with our module recap quiz. Let's get started by making sure that we have our Module 6 file open and make sure that we've saved it with a new file name. And in this particular module, we're going to be working with base calendars. So the very first thing we're going to want to do is go into and look at our default settings for calendars. And where we'll find that under the exercise of viewing the calendar options is under Tools and then down into Options. And what you're looking for in this dialog box is the Calendar tab. So when you click on the Calendar tab, you'll notice that here are your default settings. So if you want to have any changes that are going to be project wide, go ahead and change them in here and then click OK. So these are the default settings for the calendar. Okay, and you can just simply hit OK or cancel since you didn't make any changes there. So the next thing we're going to want to do is to create a new base calendar. So we'll go up to Tools, and then you're going to go down to Change Working Time, Tools and Change Working Time. And from the Change Working Time dialog box, you're going to create a new calendar. So let's click on Create New Calendar, and we get a dialog box that's asking us what we want to do. Do we want to create a new base calendar, or do we want to make a copy of the standard calendar? In this case, it's actually the same because there are no settings in the standard calendar. Now, if you did have some exceptions or some different settings within the standard calendar, it might be important that you either make a copy or create a new one. It'd be distinctive here. In this case, we're just simply going to type in my company, and we'll make a copy of the standard calendar and click OK. And notice how that changes at the top. So now we are working in our new base calendar. So let's create some exceptions. Very first thing we want to do is make sure we are in the exceptions tab as we work through this. And you're going to go ahead and scroll to January 2010 and just simply click on the first there, and then go down into your exceptions area and just type in New Year's Day. Okay, and you can hit the enter key. And what that does is it registers the date that you happen to be on. If you click away from that date, you'll notice the settings on that particular date, and you can see over here in the legend that it's an exception day. And if you click back on it, it will then reflect what the exception actually is, in case you need to modify that or edit it in any way. Okay, let's go ahead and create another exception. So now let's go find ourselves on the 18th of January. Simply click in there, then click below the New Year's Day, and we'll just simply type in birthday of MLK Jr. Okay, hit the enter key, and notice how that's reflected. And those are the only two exceptions we're going to do for now. So you're pretty much done. You've got your new calendar, and you've got your two exceptions. So let's go ahead and click OK here. So even though we did that, as you're looking at your schedule, you may be looking at this and saying, well, it didn't make a change to my project. Shouldn't it be showing those as being non-working days? Well, we haven't reflected that new base calendar in the project itself. So that's the next thing that we'll do. So now we want to apply the new calendar to the project. So let's go up to Project, then click Project Information, and you'll notice that in the Project Information dialog box, the calendar is still set to standard. So we need to set that to the new base calendar that we just created, which in this case is My Company. So let's click on My Company and click OK. And now we have applied the new base calendar that we just created to this particular schedule. The next thing that we'll look at is editing resource calendars. In this particular case, we already have resources within our schedule, and we want to have that new base calendar reflected within those resources. Okay, so this is where for a resource, for example, you're going to put in vacation days and days that they're going to be off. So the first thing is, let's go into the resource sheet. So make sure you're viewing your view bar area, click on the resource sheet, and then we're looking for the project manager. So let's double click on the project manager to go into his or her dialog box, and you are then looking for the Change Working Time button. So click on Change Working Time, which brings up the change working time dialog box, which looks a lot like the one that we were just in. But the difference is that you'll notice that this is the resource calendar for this very specific resource. So everything looks the same as what we were working with before, but we're distinctively working with the project manager. So what we're doing is we are telling Microsoft Project that this project manager is going to use the My Company calendar that we created as their base calendar. Okay, so they will inherit those changes that we made in My Company. In fact, if you scroll back into January, you will see those exceptions came over into the calendar. Now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set some very specific exceptions for this particular resource. So make sure that you've scrolled back into January, and we are going to make a change to this particular resources calendar. So what we want to do is this particular resource is going to be off from the 19th to the 22nd. So if you click on the 19th, hold down the Shift key and click on the 22nd, and then click on the name under exceptions and just simply type in vacation. So this project manager is going to be off the 19th through the 22nd. That's the exception that you're making for this particular resource. And then just simply click away from that. Okay. Now setting non-default working days. And notice that I had to click in there in order to get the exceptions filled out there. Now let's set a non-default workday week. So we want to make sure we're still in the change working time dialog box. We're going to click on the 4th of January, and this time we're going to go into work weeks. Okay, we're going to go into work weeks and click underneath the default, right underneath the name field right here. Okay, and type in half day. And hit the tab key. Okay. Now with that line selected, you're going to go into and make sure you're in there, and you might want to click in the date just to reflect that, and then hit the details button. With the details button selected, you can now make some very distinctive changes. So here you're going to click on Monday, and notice how it shows the dates that they're working. You're going to set the day to these specific working times. Okay, and in this particular case, this resource is not working in the afternoon, so we're going to remove the second set of times there for this particular resource. So you set the day, these specific working times, you remove that second line out of there, right? You're going to click OK. And if you click away from that resource, you'll notice that in this case, it's just simply underlined. It doesn't show an exception day, but rather it shows an edited working hours within the legend for this. And it shows a half day, 1/4 through 1/4. This resource is only working, right, the half day. And notice the coloration here, non-default work week, right? It's slightly yellow, and you should see that on your screen, and it's showing a non-default work week. And then you can simply click OK, and then OK again. And that moves us on to the recap quiz.